Hello guys, welcome again to my channel. It is the Caribbean Bookworm, and if you're new here, this is a channel where I love talking about books, especially horror books, but sometimes also fantasy, sci-fi, historical fiction, non-fiction, and all of the above, basically, as well as talking occasionally about science and mathematics. So if either of those topics pique your fancy, feel free to hit from now on the like, and feel free to hit the bell notification and subscribe, as that greatly helps with this channel. And I think you're in for a treat if you're interested in either of those things, as in this video I'm going to give a shout out to various channels which I greatly enjoy, both on the booktube side of things as well as on the scientific side of things. So without further ado, let's get into it. So there are several types of channels out there, which I like to categorize in, you could say, types of boxes, you could say. There are big channels out there, which are like above 1K, I would say. It's already a big channel. Maybe my standards are low, I don't know. But I think even having something like 500 subscribers or something is a huge deal. So even 100 is something which was very hard for me to fathom in a very long while. So people that have stuff like 500 subscribers and such, major respects, as I know formulaically the ways in which you need to go about it, but actually going about it is a very tough job. So major props to you. But without praising things too much, one of the boxes is me categorizing very huge channels out there and talking about them very briefly, since the meat and bone is that I want to talk about channels that are a bit, well, a bit more lower, beyond like lower than that like 10K like huge spectrum of channels. Though I might perhaps maybe mention one or two of those, but I mainly want to talk about some channels that are slightly smaller, which I still really enjoy watching. So again, both on the booktube and on the science end of things. So without further ado, let's jump into some of the bigger channels, and let's start with some of the booktube ones. So some of the booktube channels out there are the stuff that basically got me into booktube in the first place. I saw some of their videos, I saw some of their reviews, and I thought that, oh shoot, people can talk about books. Like, there's a platform and a world here on YouTube in which you can actually talk about books and people will listen to you. So for example, one of the channels like ChapterStackss was one of those channels which very much initially sparked my curiosity to like talk about bookish stuff. Like ChapterStackss, there's I think Julia Sapphire as well, especially when I saw that Julia Sapphire, that she read like the Red Dragon books and the books by Thomas Harris. Really liked her reviews on it, and I thought, oh, and I've read Red Dragon by the point at which I saw her reviews, because after I finished Red Dragon, I tried looking up reviews for the book, and I found one, and it has that kind of introduced me a little bit to the booktube world. But ChapterStackss definitely is a great one, especially if you want to find reviews out there for like psychological thrillers and horror types of books. There is of course Murphy Napier, or I don't know how to pronounce her surname, but there's Murphy Napier, and there's also Daniel Greene, which both of them occasionally they make videos together, like collaboration videos, but both of them are really good at talking especially about fantasy books, and Daniel Greene especially like is super passionate about high fantasy. So if you want to see reviews for books which are very much on the high fantasy ends of things, so someone diving very deep into, say for example, the Tolkien universe, or into the Game of Thrones books or something along those lines, then I think you would very much find your footing with Daniel Greene. And he also occasionally talks about Stephen King, which, as you know, with me, if you're talking about Stephen King, well, if you don't, well, I tend to really like Stephen King. So if you're talking about Stephen King, you have me on board. And likewise goes for Murphy. Murphy also talks quite a bit about fantasy novels, but in general, she also dissects a lot, just literature in general. Like, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, she's either a teacher or she studied English literature. One of those things. She's just, I know, really good at dissecting and analyzing literature pieces and analyzing genres and looking at the trends, tropes, and such. So I tend to really like that channel for that specific reason. There's also Canto 1408, as well as Mike's Books Reviews. Both of these channels are very good, especially for horror. So if you want to look into more horror books and look at a lot of horror reviews, I mean, some of those channels which I've mentioned do delve into horror, don't get me wrong. But for example, Mike's Books Review, I think that channel is like it's the definitive booktube channel if you want horror content. Like he dives so well and analyzes horror so well. I cannot emphasize it enough. And speaking of which, this has me very excited. I mentioned in one of my videos, which I've posted a couple of I think weeks ago, where I talked about like what got me into horror. I mentioned how unfortunate I felt that it was that when the Dark Tower series, which Amazon wanted to premiere, got like canceled, that they didn't even air the pilot episodes which they shot. Well, it turns out I heard that Mike Flanagan, the director of Midnight Mass, The Haunting of Hill House, and some other great works out there, is actually tackling the Dark Tower. I think he actually found the rights for it because I read in a lot of articles that it is something that he's been like struggling to get the rights for a very long time, as he's a very big Stephen King fan. And after watching, for example, Midnight Mass, I can very clearly see the inspiration which he took from that. It's because Midnight Mass itself feels a lot like a Stephen King story. So I can imagine this author indeed being very inspired by Stephen King. So I'm very happy that he's actually tackling the Dark Tower. So pleasant days and nights for all of us, say. So yes, that's great news, and I'm very curious to see how, for example, channels like Mike's Books Reviews, because occasionally he talks about series as well, and other channels like Go to Dissect, you could say Stephen King Dark Tower series whenever that comes out. Kanto 1408, besides books, he does movie reviews as well. Like I know that he did some stuff with A Nightmare on Elm Street, even reviewed the remake for the Hellraiser 2022. I haven't checked it out since I want to check the movie for myself, but still, I'm very much looking forward to these things coming up. Like horror is like taking a turn for the best, like these late upcoming years. But besides now the booktube channels and the bookish channels, oh well, there's one more that I wanted to mention. This is a very big channel, and it's not strictly booktube, it's just in general for one topic, and that is Star Wars. And the channel that I want to mention is Star Wars Theory. It's one of my favorite channels out there. He talks a lot about basically everything Star Wars related. So every new thing that they introduce in there, or stuff from the legends, like continuity spectrum of things, or from the movies, from the franchises, and he even talks about leaks that are going on for like some of the shows and such. Star Wars Theory, if you're a Star Wars fan like me, it's I highly recommend you check that channel. Like it's one of the best Star Wars channels out there. Unfortunately, I myself with my channel have not done stuff with Star Wars yet. It's something which I've been meaning to get into. Like I've been meaning to, besides do just horror and I'm doing right now a lot of science, but besides primarily being focused into horror, I've been meaning to get a little bit into fantasy as well. But the thing is, I noticed that, well, it's not all types of fantasies that pique my fancy. And I think one of the easiest segues into something else, like sci-fi, might be with something like Star Wars, since I do like Star Wars, and I do like even the novel contents of Star Wars. I've started with the Lost Stars book, that is, I think, in the canon right now. It's very good, but I still haven't gone through the thing yet, so I need to go through the thing to actually give you guys a review. But I do want to do more Star Wars, and if you want to see more Star Wars, I definitely recommend you check out like Star Wars Theory. Great channel. Now, besides talking about booktube stuff, I actually wanted to talk about some science channels which I really enjoy. And some of these are very easy to name off of my head. Some of these I actually have to go back and look at some of the names. But for example, one of them is Andrew Dotson. Andrew Dotson is a graduate student, a PhD student in the US. And he basically studies, I think, nuclear physics, theoretical nuclear physics. But primarily, he is really good at creating physics content that is very engaging for even people outside of physics. I think a lot of people look at Andrew Dotson in the same way which a lot of people have looked at Simon Clark's channel, which ironically is the channel which inspired Andrew to begin with, and they kind of have this more of a peek behind the valley as to what it is actually like to be a physics student. So they tend to see the struggles, they tend to see the highlights, and he also like makes fun skits and meme videos, which actually really help to kind of get you an idea as to what like physics majors actually talk about and what they're actually like. So Andrew Dotson's channel is a very fun channel and also a very informative channel, as he consistently has videos like talking about in depth like physics content, and even has a lot of derivation videos. And I think I have a theory that he is one of those channels which actually sparked basically the booming of content of channels actually like producing high quality, like you could say mathematical derivation heavy videos. Like I don't think that used to be a big thing on YouTube, because you don't it's a very niche audience that will look at those types of videos. But I think people like Andrew Dotson actually got things going, especially with the amount of following that he has. But besides Andrew Dotson, there's also the channel which I really like called the Eigenbros, which is a very clever name, I think, especially if you've done linear algebra with eigenvalues and eigenstates and eigen everything eigen basically. But Eigenbros is basically a podcast channel in which you have these two guys, which well, right now they're on a bit of a hiatus, so they might not be producing like videos for a portion of time, unfortunately. But you can still look at their old podcast, and I like it because besides just hearing at someone talking, like for example with Sean Carroll's podcast, in this case you actually see them talking, and sometimes they even like edit their videos, so you see them like pictures popping up or graphs popping up or mathematical bits popping up as they're talking about content. And they talk about several physics content and even some more fun like content out there. I like they occasionally jump into like MBTI personality test stuff, which has nothing to do with physics, but along with them, I also find MBTI stuff kind of interesting. They also talk about some stuff with UFOs, aliens, and it's even one of my favorite like podcasts that I almost all the time go back to. Like I have to watch it almost every 2 months, you could say, because it's so fun. Is one where they talk about crank intellectuals. Like it's hilarious like podcast. So if you have the time, and for example if you want to do some chores or something and want to play something in the background, you can definitely rely on the Eigenbros. Besides them, there's also Anton Petrov, which I think, especially if you like astronomy, you might have bumped into his videos before. It's a big channel, and the reason why I really like his channel is especially if you've kind of like outgrown some of the popular science stuff, like for example SciShow, which don't get me wrong, SciShow is really good, and I still like them a lot. If you want to look at more like summaries of like papers that have been written or research that have been recently done, Anton Petrov is really good. Like he summarizes research papers, especially in astronomy, really well. He does so with visuals. Like I think he uses a lot of times like Universe Sandbox, which is a game which I really wanted to download for my laptop as well. But that game takes so much like rendering, like it takes so much off of your laptop that it's insane to download that game. But he uses it in a very creative manner. Like besides, for example, talking about some of the stuff like Oumuamua, like with the interstellar object that passed through our solar system, that I think Avi Loeb like thought was an alien or something. But all that aside, he even uses Universe Sandbox to show in some of his like older videos like how some of our theories for like stellar formation or galaxy formation actually works. Like he has videos like showing him making a galaxy, and I thought that was really cool. Like you actually see like for example some of the very active stars forming up, some of the supernovae happening, and how those supernovae actually kind of give life to the galaxy. Very fascinating stuff. So I highly recommend that channel. There's also Dr. Becky, who is an astrophysicist from the UK. I think she works at Oxford. That also is, I think, very much in line with Anton Pietrov. But the cherry on the pie is that she's an academic and is working actively as a researcher. So she oftentimes has her own takes on some things which she feels like professionally like is relevant for, especially cosmology. So really good channel as well. There is Sabine Hossenfelder as well, which is thankfully becoming a bigger and bigger channel, and she's a German physicist who has become very prominent in the world of science communication. And I like her because she's very much a non BS type of person. She calls out, especially for example, some of the under like pinnings of like theory, especially in modern physics and especially high energy physics. She points a very critical lens at things, which is quite refreshing, especially like considering that sometimes it is romanticized beyond the point at which it is actually presenting a true image of what the field is actually like. So Sabine Hossenfelder is really good. She's a great channel, especially would recommend it for the die-hard physics enthusiast. And lastly, there are two fun channels which I wanted to mention, and that is Mr. P Solves, and it is a coding channel that goes a little bit into like Python programming, but especially oriented for physics purposes. And he does a lot of problems like that are especially mathsy in a very fun way, and has some fun videos as well. And there's also NileRed, which is mainly not physicsy related. He has some videos on like radioactive isotopes and substances, but in principle it is a chemistry channel. But I like his channel so much that occasionally I have to watch it, especially as like a background like video for something, because it's very relaxing in a weird way. He's a chemistry person that kind of shows you how he creates certain substances, and he does so in the most ASMR fashion. Like, its videos are super relaxing, and I like the fact that besides doing these experiments, he's actually like during the video showing like images of like the papers that he's using for, let's say, certain reactions, because I know that for example in chemistry they have whole papers dedicated to like techniques of producing certain reactions and like attaining certain yields of some things, some methods and such, and he actually references those things. Like one of his, I think, most interesting videos was trying to recreate the substance which is produced when, for example, you hold a coin for a long time in your hand and you move it around in your hand. You get to smell that very metallic, like you can say, odor, but that odor isn't like purely from like the metal of the coin, because if you smell a coin on itself, it isn't producing that odor. It is when reacting with your like with the oil on your like hands and such that you get something that is producing that smell. And he tries to recreate that to his best possible like ability, and that video was super interesting, along with a bunch of other interesting videos by him as well. I actually spent a lot more time talking about like bigger channels than I thought that I would, but let's just make this a longer video then. Now let's talk about some, you could say, smaller booktube channels, or just booktube channels in general, which I wanted to dedicate a little bit more personal time to, as they're not these larger than life like booktube channels, but they're still channels which I thought I'd really want to mention. So going back to booktube now instead of science, the first one which I wanted to mention, very fresh and new booktube channel called Toasty Tons, which, well, the name is already kind of catchy, so good job there, mate. And besides that, he just in general he noticed that he is a booktube channel that is starting with a very nice trend. He's talking about several books that he wants to read, like for example, those books encapsulate some fantasy books. Like I think I saw Jade City in there, which a friend of mine have recommended it to me, and I really should get into Jade City. He's making really nice quality content regarding booktube, so he could use all of the support that he can get. Another channel that I wanted to mention is Gloria McNeely, which is again another one of the booktube channels, which is smaller than one of the bigger ones, but she also is very good, especially for horror. So if you want to look at a lot of horror content, and especially not just for the horror, but actually she nails the aesthetic down of a horror book channel really well. When I look at the content of her channel, she reminds me a lot of Yulia Sapphire. So if you go look at that booktube channel, I think you'll find a lot of similarities with Gloria McNeely, and that's really nice. It actually sets you into the tone, especially for example, the way she nails down the thumbnails. So some of the more technical aspects of like YouTubing, she does it really fine, and also she has really fun book haul videos, as well as I think she's trying to write, or she wrote her own story as well. So that's a channel that can definitely use your support. I'm very eager to see the videos that she's gonna come up with in the near future. So if you're interested in horror, again, and also if she talks about Stephen King occasionally as well, which is again really nice. But of course, if you want to have a really nice spooky like type of channel, like a channel that encapsulates the spirit of spooky season every year, 365 days a year, go to Gloria McNeely's channel. I think you will definitely not be disappointed. Another channel which I wanted to give a shout out to, and that is a little bit more of the one of those bigger channels, but I still wanted to give her a shout out, is Charlotte Fraza, and she's a booktube slash science channel. So actually falls a little bit more into kind of what I want to do with my channel, but she is not like say does derivations and such, but she is a neuroscience PhD student in the Netherlands, ironically, and in a city that is very close by to where I live, ironically, but of course for like privacy reasons, disclosure, but a lot of things in common there, besides the whole PhD and master's experience. Like, the channel is pretty good because I found their channel basically through wanting to be curious, especially about neuroscience. I was looking into some videos about some neuroscience book recommendations because I wanted to kind of expand my horizons in the science like sense, looking for books that are not just physics. And she has some really nice videos recommending books for people that are interested in neuroscience, both for the layperson as well as for the person with that wants a little bit more in-depth knowledge. So for the person that's just genuinely interested in neuroscience, I think Charlotte Fraza is one of those channels which you definitely want to check out. She does really nice videos both on on terms of academics, like to teach you tricks and healthy habits, you could say, for like dealing with the academic environment, which can be very, very very like either stressful, toxic, or just a combination of all of those things. And she does so in a very aesthetically pleasing manner. Her videos are very high quality. The editing's really good. The video, the audio, everything on that, like for her videos, is really well done. So please check out her channel and support like another like STEM person right there. And on that same note, one other channel which I wanted to give a shout out to is again a bigger channel, but I still definitely wanted to give him a shout out here. Is Mark Weitzman, or I think Mark Weitzman. Don't know how to pronounce his last name, but Mark Weitzman or Weitzman's Wannabe School for Theoretical Physics, or Mark Weitzman's Wannabe Theoretical Physics School, I think is what it's called. And stellar channel again on the cusp, I think of not Booktube. He's primarily a physics, like a heavy physics channel, but he does have some very nice videos out there recommending books. And as a matter of fact, some of the books which I have gotten myself are predominantly due to his videos on like books on that topic. So for example, if you like my video on like for example some textbooks which you should get as an undergraduate, I think in order to supplement into your further studies, Mark Weitzman's channel has some great stuff for you. Like he has videos dedicated to several different like topics in physics and books which you can get. So on for example relativity, on particle physics, on quantum mechanics, on quantum field theory, and even beyond that. So it's a great channel. And of course besides that, he also has great channels dabbling into like some of those very advanced topics like quantum field theory, and he actually works out problems say from books and such and like thorough detail. So if you're a very very heavy like physicsy person, especially like theoretical physics, I highly recommend you check Mark Weitzman's channel. Like it's really good. So on the Booktube end of things, I wanted to close things off by recommending the channel Athena Dura, I think. Maybe probably butchered her name, but I will put a picture of the channel here. I highly recommend you check it out, as it is a channel that basically generally she likes horror as well, and she predominantly really likes Stephen King. She even has a video on like Misery, which is one of those Stephen King books which I've been postponing to read for quite a while, so I'm very curious to hear what she has to say. And she is also just generally a person that is just very interested in horror. Her whole channel has this whole dark academia aesthetic, which is one of my favorite aesthetics. It's really nice to see. It's very Oxford or Cambridgey, you could say, and she films a lot of her videos in that fashion. So I think, especially if you like that Harry Potter aesthetic for your like videos, you should definitely check out Anna's channel. And also, besides just talking about horror books, and even beyond horror, like she talks about some other books in general. Like she has a video on The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. besides Booktube, in general, she also talks a little bit about her personal experiences as well. For example, as a PhD student. So we have another PhD student, such as Charlotte, who, well, both of them graduate students that are way more experienced than I am in terms of like academia. So yeah, I highly recommend to check the channel for if you're interested in either like the experiences again of a PhD student there. In her case, she's more into the geosciences, and also if you're again interested in horror. So check out that channel. And now that we've explored most of the like YouTube channels, like the smaller booktube channels that I wanted to talk about, we can jump into some of the, well, smaller like science channels that I wanted to talk about. I say quote unquote because some of these channels are actually pretty big, as you will see, but still they are channels which I wanted to shout out separately from the science channels which I've mentioned previously before. So in order to kick the things off, I actually wanted to give a shout out to the channel of Aleph, which I really like that name for mathematical reasons. It is a mathematics channel, and even though he doesn't post videos like every single week and such, his videos, every time that he does post something, it is of quality. He posts videos basically in which he uses this drawing type of scenario in order to explain a topic in especially pure mathematics, and he does so very elegantly. He has a video explaining, for example, what derivatives really are, and also a video as to how you can self-teach yourself a lot of areas in pure math, which is literally my favorite video of his, as I'm a big believer in being able to teach yourself a subject. So that video on self-teaching yourself a subject in pure math, if you're interested in learning one of those things, I highly recommend you check it out. It is the video which it gives you a really nice list of resources as well for every topic. It is the video which I commonly refer to, especially if, for example, right now I'm very curious to self-teaching myself real analysis, which basically delves a little bit more into the proofs behind the theorems for calculus. So that's a very handy channel if you want to teach yourself stuff like that. Another channel which I wanted to give a shout out, which I discovered through Aleph, and that is actually the channel SubAnima. It is literally, even though unfortunately it is not a big channel, SubAnima, basically, the moment I discovered it, and I discovered it ironically through that way to self-teach yourself pure math video from Aleph. When I looked into that channel, it immediately, and I saw some of his videos, it immediately turned into some of my, hands down, I'm not even exaggerating it turned out into some of my favorite biology content out there. This channel produces such high quality biology videos. I am surprised, or I won't be surprised basically, if he blows up like eventually. Like, he's already gaining subscribers very like at a very fast rate, and I'm happy because like it's a really good channel. Like, it's, if you're into biology, it's not just, for example, human biology, but he blends basically biology and philosophy very nicely. So especially if you're interested in, for example, evolutionary biology, or just videos that tackle like things that are between the edge of, say, biology and other branches of science or social sciences, such as, say, ethics and such, then I think you will really enjoy his channel. If the animations in those stunningly beautiful, and the uses of videos as well. He refers to sources in a very similar fashion to Anton Petrov does with his astronomy videos. So SubAnima is like, he's like an Anton Petrov for biology, but man, is that channel good. Please check it out. It's a really good channel. Alongside this trip towards like other science channels, there's also MewNewPhysics, which I really like the name, especially if you really enjoy tensors and physicsy, like dealing with tensors in physics, then you will get the uses of those Greek letters like mu nu a lot. But he actually writes them as like mu nu. Like, I will just show you a picture of like the channel right here. And he's a physics channel that is pretty much very much in line with like Andrew Dotson's fashion, but he's doing so for like Pakistani students that are studying physics. So if you're a student that wants to like see the perspective of a student from Pakistan and what it's like from their perspective to study physics, then I highly recommend you check out MewNew's physics channel. He does really funny videos like physics meme reviews, and one which I'm going to like finish watching it the moment like I'm done editing this video right now, and that is the recent video that he just uploaded. And we also did a video together on like meme reviews. So if you want to check that out, you can feel free to head to his channel to check out that video as well. Like again, it's a really fun channel. He's pretty much, I think, like an upcoming Andrew Dotson, you can say. So highly recommend that channel. And lastly, I wanted to give a recommendation to my Hubble Abode. You might have seen her recently in my video of like talking about the 1 pound black hole versus the 1,000 pound black hole. My Hubble Abode is a great channel. I've discovered her recently like through like the physics slanders videos that she made, and I thought immediately that yeah, I kind of want to get in touch with my Hubble Abode, and I'm very grateful that I did. Her content is really good. She very recently uploaded a very interesting video on cosmic inflation, which I highly recommend you check out. It is mathematically a bit more like intense, you could say. Like it's not mathematically for the faint of heart, but still she explains it in a manner that is still pretty much, it doesn't creep you away, or it doesn't bore you to death like a professor actually like teaching cosmology or GR. So highly recommend my Hubble Abode, especially not just for example for the cosmology video which I've just mentioned. That's just one example, but she does videos explaining so many other topics in astronomy and astrophysics, and she has this very creative way of doing so by combining her passion and hobby of crocheting with her interest in astronomy, astrophysics, and physics in general. So, for example, she has a list of videos in which she crochets socks, you could say, while talking about, for example, one of the planets in our solar system. So Uranus, Saturn, etc., etc. So, highly recommend you check my Hubble Abode's channel. It's a very fun channel, very colory, like gives you joys of life, and especially with the thumbnails which are made. So please check out her channel. She's doing a really great job. And yeah, that basically sums up the channels which I wanted to give a shout out to. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that Booktube/science channel shout out, and I hope you find some of those channels pretty entertaining and useful. If any of you happen to have watched this video, then I think most of you are very busy people, but if you do, I hope I did your channel justice. And again, truly know that I find your channels very interesting and entertaining. So keep doing what you're doing. I'm very curious to see what you guys are doing, like or continue to do in the future. In general, for the rest of you guys watching, stay tuned for more videos, as I'm doing a part 2, you could say, to this video that is not a shout out bit, but that is a book haul bit. It is more of a textbook book haul, as I didn't give myself too many novels recently, but I did give myself a lot of physics textbooks. So for the physics people on this channel, I think you'll definitely enjoy that. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you guys again very soon. Bye.